It would appear that Daniel Ricciardo may have more than just one foot in his career's grave at this point. At the end of the day, all things come to an end, and very rarely at a time of our choosing. This brutal fact of life is something that hits athletes the hardest, with their day of reckoning coming mere years after their peak, and those that don't want to let go often make for quite a sad situation. One such driver currently experiencing this is Daniel Ricciardo, and before you get mad at me for saying that, you should wait until you hear what both we and his team have to say before you start slinging insults. The long, slow goodbye has been happening ever since he departed Renault, with the Aussie making some career decisions that would even confuse Fernando Alonso. But the worst part is, in regards to how he leaves the sport, he has ultimately been let down by the very team he trusted to restart his career. Want to know why the Singapore Grand Prix will be the final race in Daniel Ricciardo's F1 career? Fair or not, the situation is stacked up against him, with his Baku result being the final nail in the coffin. With all the chaos and excitement at the Baku Grand Prix, we can't blame you if Daniel Ricciardo's race didn't exactly catch your eye. A dull race in no man's land with no threat of moving forwards or backwards was really not what Daniel Ricciardo needed, and in a race with 4 retirements including direct competitors and cars far ahead, as well as 5 drivers outside the top 4 teams finishing in the points positions, Daniel Ricciardo finishing an anonymous P13 over 30 seconds behind Pierre Gasly is certainly not the ideal outcome for the Aussie driver. Perhaps the only saving grace for Ricciardo is the fact that Yuki Tsunoda got Lance Strolled on lap 1, meaning that he couldn't be compared to his teammate who started 3 places ahead. So where did it go wrong for Ricciardo in Baku? Well, according to him, some of the wildest tyre graining he has ever faced, forcing the team into a cycle of managing tyres and losing pace. I felt like we dropped so far back. I was definitely in a no man's land. We tried to do all we could. Ricciardo would say that the sheer amount of radio communication from his race engineer Pierre Hamlin caused the engineer to apologize to Ricciardo, which he was quick to dismiss as he believed it was necessary. We expected some graining, but losing 2-3 seconds a lap was not what we expected. It was so weird. We dropped so much and then all of a sudden it started to clear. I think my lap time swing was 4 seconds. It was crazy from when it was really bad to when it cleared. I would have never expected it came back the way it did. Tyres were, if you excuse the pun, a hot topic at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, with thermal degradation crippling some drivers' races. You only need to look at Hamilton's experience to see that nobody was safe. However, some teams and drivers were capable of managing it far better than others. By the time RB got on top of the issue, the damage was already done, and Daniel did show decent pace towards the back end of the race. As he said, his lap time was swinging a whopping 4 seconds over the course of the race. According to technical director Jody Egginton, the Honey Badger had a good race overall, but he was massively hampered by issues, with the technical director having this to say about his drive. Daniel's race started okay, with the car appearing reasonably well balanced, but was totally dominated by severe tyre graining, leading to a significant drop-off in pace and track position. He got back on the pace, but the damage was done, and it was impossible to recover without the intervention of a safety car, which did not come, so we boxed him late on. However, despite the overall positive messaging about a tough race, the wider messaging coming from the team and especially Red Bull should be of massive concern to Ricciardo. Primarily, this is because, according to Ted Kravitz, the decision as to who will be in the RB seat for the rest of the season will be announced following the Singapore Grand Prix, with the pundit saying, Helmut Marko is saying that it's now after Singapore that we will hear whether it's going to be Daniel Ricciardo or Liam Lawson. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Daniel has one last race to prove himself then, but truth be told, I think the decision has already been made. It'd take a miraculous drive from Daniel, a podium finish, or a shock pole position to come anywhere close to making up for the post-summer break mundanity seen at RB as a whole, not just in his own drives. Following Singapore, Formula 1 is going into a summer break part 2 with a 3 weeks break between the hardest race on the calendar and the comparatively easy and low-risk circuit of the Americas. Introducing Lawson before this break would have seen him race at Zandvoort, Monza, Baku and Singapore, all of which are recognized for their unique challenges, making them some of the hardest on the calendar. While Liam has proved that he is more than capable of taking on the challenges of Formula 1, giving Daniel 4 final chances to prove himself while also guaranteeing the Kiwi a smoother introduction on 3 open traditional circuits was the safest move that Red Bull could have taken. Daniel's failure to give Red Bull a reason to keep him in the seat isn't even solely down to him, as he is also a victim of a team that has been far surpassed by Williams, Haas, and even Alpine at times, plummeting from their early season expectations of challenging the likes of Aston Martin. According to ex-team boss Franz Tost, time hasn't been on the team's side, and that is a huge factor as to what is letting Ricciardo down. The problem lies in the development process. They are bringing upgrades, but the fine-tuning needs to be adjusted properly, and that's where they're currently struggling. Not just the Racing Bulls, but other teams too. Why? Because there's very little time for testing or during free practice sessions. You have to test the tyres and also do a lot of setup work. Time just runs out, and that's the problem the Red Bulls and other teams are facing right now. The likes of Haas and Williams becoming more and more competitive as the season goes on, with Williams seeming to go into hyperspace following their weight loss program following the summer break, will have certainly raised alarms at RB, and in doing so has given them an impossible conundrum. Do you keep the driver you currently have, or do you take a punt on a driver that has no guarantee to improve the team's situation and could even do a worse job? While we don't think the latter part of that question will be the case, it's worth exploring why RB would make the decision to put Lawson in the car over the incumbent Ricciardo. After all, if you're upsetting the apple cart, you better have a good reason for doing so. Well, that's because of a simple principle as old as the sport: points win prizes. Daniel Ricciardo has scored a rather dismal 12 points in 17 races, and while yes, he hasn't exactly been well equipped to challenge for the points places, the fact his teammate has scored nearly double that at 22 and he has faced some dismal luck in recent rounds where he has started further up the road says an awful lot about the quality of Daniel's drives. The other thing to consider is that we don't know how far along their upgrade program RB are. With 2025 looking to be a 2024 Part 2, the traditional upgrade timings and processes have been thrown out of the window. For all we know, RB's attention may have turned fully to next year already, with them prioritizing fixing the fundamental issues of the car above upgrading and refining their current package any further. Of course, they won't be resigning themselves to the fact that Haas and Williams are catching them. However, if there is little to nothing coming in terms of support from the factory, then the one major change that the team can make to improve the situation is to change the man in the car. I mean, even if they are caught up by the teams trailing them, while the prize money would be missed, they'd at least get increased wind tunnel time in the build-up to 2026, but I highly doubt a Formula 1 team would see that as much of a silver lining. So, with the team not providing Daniel the opportunity to compete, Lawson being promised a seat for next season to prevent him from going elsewhere, and the fact that Daniel simply hasn't done enough to give a reason why he should be preferred over a young, hungry driver with a lot of potential, it does seem that Singapore will be Daniel Ricciardo's swan song. If that is the case, then Ricciardo will have experienced some of the highest highs and the lowest lows a driver could have experienced in his career, and will provide pub arguments about what-ifs surrounding said career for many years to come. So what do you think? If you disagree with us, feel free to let us know, but we think the writing is on the wall and it's just a matter of getting the hostile Singapore out of the way before introducing Liam Lawson. Thank you for watching.